it's possible that they fund that same grant again. And the tweets and stuff from Sacramento make it look like that's what they'll do. So if that happens, it's a $40,000 grant. So you get about 625 awards out of 25 million bucks. That'll go fast. Last year, when they opened the portal, like they would get over 1,000 applications in the first few hours.
Hi everybody, Jose Luis Morales here. Welcome back to another episode of the Morales Group Show. Today we have Ryan OConnell with How To ADU, and we are going to be talking about the newest ADU laws in 2023 and 2024. We're going to be talking about AB 1033. We're going to be talking about AB 976 and a couple of different things. Before we get started though, Ryan, welcome to the show. For our viewers that don't know who you are, who is Ryan OConnell, and then how did you get involved in this ADU world?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. I run How To ADU, which is a YouTube channel and a TikTok and some other stuff that's obsessed with housing and specifically helping people build in their backyards or convert part of their house into an apartment. When I saw the ADU rules sweeping across California, I wasn't even in housing, but I really wanted to get involved with the housing shortage and the affordable housing shortage. And ADUs were my foot in the door. And I don't know why, but I got obsessed with this thing. And I started YouTubing about it in 2020 and everybody was stuck inside. So they started watching the channel and it's been a blast. Now I get to advocate for new laws, which is what we're going to talk about today. So I spend time in Sacramento with the lobbyists and the muckety mucks. And I also spend a lot of time with homeowners, just helping them figure out how they can make their projects work.
I love it. What I love about this, Ryan, is that there's a lot of misunderstandings about the ADUs and a lot of miscommunication as to what the state requires and what the cities adopt. So maybe
Yeah.
where we can start off is just kind of giving a brief overview of what the actual ADU laws are today, and then some of the changes. We can go into the changes. So maybe for somebody that doesn't know what an ADU is, what is an ADU? What is a junior ADU? Can investors build it? Can owner occupied build
Yeah.
it? What is it?
Yeah, I'll start with like a little context of, your local city planning department, building department, all the city officials, they're in charge of that city. They've got local police power is what it's called. And so they get to set the rules, they get to enforce the rules. And for decades and decades, almost all of our cities and counties made it very difficult to build housing. And you have to jump through a lot of hoops, you got public reviews, you got all kinds of things that can happen. So the state carved out this special thing called an accessory dwelling unit. Doesn't roll off the tongue, ADU, but it's building a house in your backyard. It's converting part of your house into an apartment. And there's a legal definition. I'm not a lawyer, so go read the code. and that if you are building an ADU, then you get to skip some of those local rules under certain conditions. And it just kind of lays a path. Now, having said that, that's a state rule. And who enforces the state rules? It's the local cities. And so if they really want to dig their heels in, they can find ways to still make it complicated. And there's still this discourse between like the state and the local municipality. And as a homeowner, you might think it's frustrating that it's not just an easy answer, but it's a process. And so, yeah, that's kind of the shortest way I can explain it. There's this state level stuff. There's locals who are in charge of everything. And the ADU rules make it so that it's a lot easier than it used to be, but there's still a bit of a complicated process and a lot of misinformation. Sometimes you'll be teaching people things when you talk to the locals and the state officials.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you 100%. Okay. And then what are the rules for building ADUs? Like, what are the max limits? What are
Yeah.
can you convert a garage? Can you convert a portion of your house? And then we can talk about some of the changes.
Yeah, so again, a little complicated, but the state will say like, hey, if you want to build an ADU, the city, if they have no rules in the city, then you can build up to 1,200 square feet in habitable square footage. And then the city, if they want, they can have rules, but those rules can't cap you more restrictively than 1,050 square feet or something like that for a 2-bedroom plus, or 800 something for a 1-bedroom. and then the city can then set some rules that adopt those maximums, right? The city can say, oh, you can't build larger than 1,000 or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, even if the city adopts that as a maximum, a lot of the time homeowners will go in with a square footage of 1,000 square feet, say, this is allowed. Your maximum, it's under your maximum. And the city says, but you have a floor area ratio requirement, or you have an open lot percentage requirement, or you have these other rules. So even though the max size is technically 1,000 in our city, for your lot, it's really limited because you're built up to the maximum FAR and you can't build more than, 400 square feet. In that case, then there's a special exemption that the state built to say, hey, if they limit you to if their limit would completely preclude the construction of an 800 square foot ADU, it's unenforceable. And so things become a lot simpler as soon as we start talking about either 800 square feet or less with 4 foot side and rear yard setback and under the right height limit, or conversions of existing space. In those two cases, you could do a lot. The state says if you have a 3,000 square foot barn on a big rural lot, you can convert the whole thing into an ADU, 3,000 square feet. And like the more common example is if you've got a garage right on your lot line, you could convert that garage even though it's non-conforming to the normal setbacks. You might have other limits, like the building department might say, hey, fire safety, you can't put windows on the side facing your neighbor because you're too close to that structure, or you'll need fire sprinklers. Or, the utilities company might say, oh, you've got a power line that drops right there. It makes it real complicated to convert that space. So there's still exceptions, but under 800 square feet, broadly, a lot of people will get a yes. And conversion of existing space, broadly speaking, you usually get yes. You often get yeses, I'll say.
Got it. I love it. Now, a lot of people don't know about this, but even the ADU laws apply to apartment complexes as well, too. I know I own an apartment complex that's 25 units, and we're going through the process at the moment. Can you talk a little bit about that as well, too?
Yeah, it's really cool. It's actually like a separate kind of body of the ADU code. So if you have a single family dwelling where it's just one unit that doesn't share walls with another unit, you have one set of rules. And even if it's 2 units but they don't share a wall, that still uses those single family dwelling rules. If you have a multifamily dwelling on the property, well, you just described, multiple units share walls, then you get multifamily rules, and they're even more progressive in some ways. So what the cities have to allow, according to state rules, at the moment, is that they can allow 2 detached ADUs or the conversion of interior space that isn't habitable yet, like laundry rooms or hallways, commercial real estate on the ground floor, stuff like that. They can allow the conversion of at least 1 unit out of that space, or up to 25% of the total number of units. So if there's investors out there who are buying like a 16 unit building with commercial ground floor, and they're converting the commercial ground floor to 4 really baller ground floor units. And that's great. And that's what it's for. So yeah. And then some cities will adopt the word or. Some cities will say inclusive. So you get to do both. And other cities will kind of say, oh, one or the other.
Yeah, so even like for the apartment that I bought, like I'm getting permits for 6 additional units on a 25 unit apartment, which now makes it from a 25 unit apartment to a 31 unit apartment, which just makes it like even more of a better investment opportunity. So let's talk about some of the changes. So what do you see for ADUs, or what are some of the laws that are currently pending right now? Have they passed? Are they likely to pass? And what are some of those changes that you see coming along?
Yeah. So, a bunch of rules went into effect last January, which allows for 2-story ADUs in a lot of places and stuff like that. And then we're talking on September 22nd. That's the end of the legislative session, was the 15th. And that means that we know all the bills that have passed through our state legislature already. But now they sit on Newsom's desk, and the governor has like 30 days or something to sign, veto, or do nothing. So we're kind of in suspense. We don't know which ones will pass, which ones won't from his desk. But I could talk about the ones that are through the legislature, which is really exciting. For one, and this is kind of I hope, a gimme. There's a Some of you might know already there that cities cannot require owner occupancy on ADUs. So like investors can you can build an ADU and rent out the ADU and the main house, and you can live somewhere else because owner occupancy cannot be required. But that actually sunsets in 2025. And so there's a new law that removes that sunset clause and makes it a permanent restriction. Cities will never, well, until as long as that law stands, cities will not be able to require owner occupancy for ADUs. And that's a really exciting one because it takes this 5-year experiment or whatever it's been and expands it indefinitely. The other really, really exciting one is this is a really complicated one, but it's called separate conveyance. And what it means is condos. What it would do is follow the model in other states like Washington and Oregon and Texas, where you can turn an ADU into a condominium and sell it separately from the main house. Yeah, and you can imagine that has some pretty big implications. Now, that is also complicated because it is not a statewide rule. Like, it's not a mandate. It doesn't say every city can now do this. What it does is it creates a structure so that cities that want to do that can do it legally. And they'll, in January, if that law goes into effect, friendly cities will start saying, okay, how do we adopt an ordinance that allows for this? And they'll start adopting processes city by city to allow developers or homeowners to condominiumize their ADUs, which is very exciting.
Got it. Would that make the primary residence a condominium as well too, or just the secondary unit a condominium?
That's a very good question, right? So you do carve into the value of the primary, whether you condominiumize both or not, right? But this is all new to me, so I've been interviewing like lawyers in Texas who've been doing a lot of these to try to wrap my head around how it might work. But what I always say is like, well, this is a complicated one, so you're gonna have to, keep watching the Morales Group channel. Come to How to ADU. Subscribe because we'll do updates as cities adopt these policies, and we'll show how it's actually working. What it means though is basically what you said. You gotta, in general, in other states, you drop a parcel map that shows, hey, these are the APNs for the different condominiums. You draw up like an HOA kind of covenant, CCNR, and you make a tiny HOA on your property. And so, yeah, you have rules about how you share access and where the trash goes. And when you buy the condo, are you buying the walls or just what's inside the wall? All of that has to be really thoroughly documented by professional attorneys. Don't do this. Don't cowboy this one. And then we'll see how it gets regulated over time as disagreements come up in actual cases. But yeah, it's kind of brand new territory. Lots of learning to do, and I'll just say watch this space.
Got it. Okay, so we talked about that one's AB, not the condominium one, the one where the investors AB 976. We talked about AB, I think 1033. Have we talked about AB 1033? What about 1332 and 434? What are those?
I'm gonna have to check my crib sheet just to make sure I'm right here. But these numbers, man, it's like alphabet soup, right? So 434 is an HCD authority bill. So what that would do is it's not restricted to ADUs. It gives this organization called the HCD, that's Housing and Community Development. It's kind of like the California version of HUD. And they're in charge of enforcing a lot of the affordable housing rules in the state. So it would give them a lot more authority. And a good example of this is you might have heard of how ADU permits are supposed to take no longer than 60 days. Mm-hmm. But it's not super clear what happens at the end of 60 days, right? And like whenever, I mean, in my experience, all jurisdictions take longer than 60 days almost. And at the end of the 60 days, the homeowner's like, so what happens now? Do we fight? It's like, don't fight. Just write them a nice letter that says like, hey, can I get an update? Yeah, please. The fight will take you 2 years. But this bill gives a little bit more teeth for the HCD to weigh in on things like delays, on things like ADUs, on things like small housing projects under 10 units. So there's a bunch of detail, but again, hopefully what we see is that this works into the fabric of everything that already exists. And like, for example, right now, if I write to the HCD and say, hey, this client has waited longer than 60 days, they're going to be like, yeah, Ryan. So what we were, we feel for you, but like, what do you want us to do? After this law passes, I'm hoping that they feel like it's more in their wheelhouse to, if nothing else, catalog that delay, report on it to the state, and maybe come up with some enforcement actions behind it. Again, all this is kind of new to me. I have to wait and see how a lot of these get implemented before I can tell people what's actually happening on the ground. Like, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal expert. I'm just a guy who like reads about this and then talks to homeowners and like, so what's actually happening, which turns out to be helpful.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you get the firsthand experience. Okay, and then there's one. Is that 1332 that's left, or is that 434? The one
Yeah. 1332 I didn't talk about. And this one is, it's an interesting one. We could talk, it's just scratch the surface. It would require local governments like cities and counties to build registries of pre-approved ADU plans. So if you look across California right now, a lot of jurisdictions have tackled pre-reviewed plans or pre-approved plans, standard plans. And it's really interesting sometimes. Like in some areas, it's made a lot of headway. In other cases, it's been a big investment in local resources, but people aren't really using the plans, or it hasn't shortened the timeline. And so there's some right ways to do it and some less right ways to do it. And hopefully there's even better ways that we haven't yet discovered. But this would mandate all cities to do this, is my understanding. And that's a big ask. Like for cities over a certain size, I completely understand the benefit and of the scale. But to ask, towns with populations of like 10,000 people to do pre-reviewed plans. Anyway, I'm not sure. I got to dig into the detail and figure out how that looks. And then I hope the cities that, if this passes, the cities that do adopt, I hope that they do it in the ways that have been successful, which is it is very rare that you want to just provide free plans without any guidance. There's a couple jurisdictions that have tried that, and they were early in the process, and bless them. But like, you need a lot of help citing those plans on your property, doing the extra pieces like, structural engineering if it's required because you had changes in your siting, geotax and that kind of stuff, Title 24 for your specific area, seismic standards, like all these things that you just vary project to project. You want a system of pre-approval that still hooks homeowners up with the professionals they need to do that. And so examples that I think work are San Jose has pre-reviewed plans, but they don't publish them. They give you a list of the professionals who have pre-approved plans. And so you get to contact them and they'll hook you up with the right plan and they'll cite it. And then it's over the counter, but it takes some time, but it's still fast. And that's really interesting. They've also got a separate permit desk for ADUs that are going through that process. So it's like separate staff is my understanding. And it actually goes much faster because they have a different priority, different KPIs at work. The other one I really like, I live in Napa, so I'm going to rep out for the Napa Sonoma ADU Center. They're a nonprofit and they organized all 16 jurisdictions up here. And they have one website where you go and you can shop all the different floor plans and layouts. And if you want one, then you kind of like click, put me in touch with the designer or the prefab company or the builder. And then again, they put you in touch with that person. And they don't, in some of the jurisdictions, those plans have been reviewed and approved. And in other jurisdictions, somebody's just looked at them and been like, yeah, that's cool. So it depends which of the 16 towns you're in.
Mhm.
But in all cases, it's again giving you that hand holding step, which you still need if you're a newbie, if you're a first time developer.
Got it. I love it. Okay, cool. What about like any government assistance programs? Are those coming back out again? And if
Yeah.
so, what are the amounts? And what can somebody do to kind of like put their like yeah, just kind of put themselves in the front of the line?
Yeah. So this again, we're recording on September 22nd. The state budget put in $25 million for ADU incentives to be administered by Cal HFA, Cal HAFA sometimes, and that program. Well, Cal HFA used $100 million last year, and they put it toward an ADU grant, which at various times is either $25,000 or $40,000, depending on when you saw it. It's possible that they fund that same grant again, and the tweets and stuff from Sacramento make it look like that's what they'll do. So if that happens, it's a $40,000 grant, so you get about 625 awards out of 25 million bucks. That'll go fast. Last year, when they opened the portal, like they would get over 1,000 applications in the first few hours. Not all the applications make it, so but that's to say, like, I wouldn't expect things to stay open and languish for a long time. What I just dropped a video about this on my channel. What I suggest is contacting the entities that administered the grant last year. So I interviewed somebody who works with CECITA applicants. CECITA is one of the entities that could get you the grant. And they explained that CECITA, even though the grant isn't currently open, the state ADU grant, CECITA is accepting applicants. And when they look at your file, they'll help you get all these requirements together, like proof of income and scope of work and a budget. And then as soon as the grant becomes available, if you qualify, they'll be in a position to apply for you. On the other hand, if you're in Orange County, there's an Orange County program that's supposed to launch last month. We'll see when it actually launches. But as soon as that becomes available, hopefully CECITA is like, oh, look, this is yours. And I don't know that's. I'm not committing them to that course of action, but like that's pretty cool, right? And so I'm saying like, hey, don't wait until the grant comes back officially to apply. If you could go to that website today and put your information in, that's really interesting.
I love it.
Yeah. Not
So
financial advice, by the way. There are tax implications to that grant. It counts as income, and there's income eligibility requirements. So learn all the details on Cal HFA's website when they become official. If you want to apply in a non-committal way early for free, apparently there's an application portal at CECITA that would allow you to do something like that.
and also like if they want to register to your YouTube channel or even follow you on social media, it sounds like you're
Yeah.
keeping people up to date on all the latest trends as it relates to ADUs as
Yeah.
well too. Which I
Yeah,
love.
when it's a $40,000 grant, I always get a little squeamish because I'm like, I don't want to be like, I'm a YouTuber. I don't want you to think I work for the government or something. And like, I'm a little useless. Like I'm an extra. I'm just a communicator. So when people come to me and they're like, Ryan, how do I get the grant? Can I pay you to get the grant? I'm like, no, just go to the entity. Like there are people who do that. There's a state agency, but it's true that if you want information first. I have been ahead of the curve on a few occasions, especially with this grant, to publish information that helps people get 30,000 net after all the fees and tax implications and stuff. I've had hundreds of homeowners who say, "Hey, I got this thanks to you," and so yeah,
That's
that's what I
amazing.
try to do.
I love it. So I'm reading some of the changes going into the future, and I see a lot of things with height restrictions. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that?
Yeah, so the majority of those went into effect in January this year. So
Mhm.
so last September we passed I forget what all the numbers are. That's last year's cheat
Mhm.
sheet. But there were a bunch of rules. So basically there was this rule that said, hey, across the state you can't limit ADUs more restrictively than 16-foot height limit. Um, then cities kind of adopted a lot of policies that said 16-foot height max. That's an unfortunate height maximum. You know about construction, so it's like, actually, if you need 7.5 or 8 feet of headroom and you have some floor membrane and then the second floor, that means that 16 feet is just too short to do a second floor. And that's unfortunate. I do not think that was an intentional choice. 16 just seemed like a number that they could get away with. But now there's a bunch of subclauses. So 16 is the most restrictive you can get. If you're within a certain distance of public transit of a certain quality, then you can build higher. If you've got existing multi-story multifamily, then you can build higher. If you're attaching to the primary house, then you can build to the same height limit as the primary in most cases. So you want to look up the rules. A lot of local jurisdictions haven't adopted these ordinances yet, even though it's been 9 months. The state still hasn't updated its handbook. So the state HCD handbook, which is a great resource, this one thing is not well explained in that because it was passed more recently than the last update. So you just gotta be judicious and kind of like read what the thing is. If you're working with an architect or a licensed builder who's good at permits, then ask them for help. But there are a lot of cases where you can build a full 2 stories now, thanks to those higher height limits.
I love it.
Yeah, but be careful because like a lot of cities measure building height differently, so you might still get surprised. It still pays to be very sweet when you go into the planning office and just ask questions. Come in with drawings. Don't go full hypothetical necessarily because they don't love hypotheticals all the time. But you go in and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about building this. How I'm not really sure. I'm working with one person right now who's they're on a property where it slopes, and so the street's up here, but they're building on this lower part of the property. And they said, well, building height, it's from grade down here, but from the street, it'll look like a 1-story, right? Who's it bothering?" And so technically the way that the city measures building height, you got to measure from here to here. But maybe if you go into the planning department and ask them questions about it, maybe you find some ways to get to a different height limit.
I love it. Got it. So let me ask you this: there's misinformation sometimes with some of the cities, and I tell you this because I go to one city, they tell me junior ADUs have owner occupant requirements. I go to another city, like, oh no, not a problem. Junior ADUs, you don't have to have owner requirement.
Yeah.
I go somewhere, they tell me just different restrictions. How do I find out actually what the state has mandated and whether or not whatever impositions the city is putting on are actually true, or whether they're trying to impose something that maybe isn't really enforceable?
Yeah. The ultimate piece of advice is because you can't learn all the rules. And even I spent all my time doing this. I don't start by going like, I happen to know what the rule is in Ventura or whatever. Never do that. Just go, hey, there's a state body called the HCD that is in charge of providing technical assistance to cities. And so you go to the HCD webpage and they have an ADU feedback form specifically for this. And you say, hey, I live in this jurisdiction. This is my address. I have proposed a project and they rejected it, or I have done this. I went in and they told me something, or here's a handout that they give. And that's confusing to me because I thought it was the other way. I thought I could build higher. I thought there was no owner occupancy. Can you provide technical assistance to the city and also tell them you can use me as an example or don't use me as an example? Share that piece of information. It's very helpful. And then they'll go and talk to the city. And that's the easiest way. And then they'll come back and tell you how the conversation went. That's the easiest way to get an answer from the state that's hopefully going to be thinking about housing. That's what the HCD wakes up and does. Whereas the planning department in your local jurisdiction has other responsibilities. They're worried about everybody in the community, and they have local bosses who are elected officials. And so they they have different balance, right? And so you just want to get somebody who doesn't live there involved in the conversation to judge the state rules. And it could go either way. Sometimes the answer comes back and they say, the city's kind of, they're in a gray area, but they kind of got a point here. And then
Got it. I love that. Okay, cool. And then that response usually will probably take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Or what do you kind of think?
I won't. It varies a lot. So like back in the day, a year ago, I would go months without an update on a case, and just a very small kind of behind the scenes change in how they handled cases led to this huge improvement in turnaround time. And it's very small things, right? Like if you've ever managed a team, like, oh, we changed the service level agreement, or we changed how we do round robin response, and like these small technical changes resulted in a big improvement. And so that kind of change can happen at any time. I don't want to commit them to it, but actually, frequently these days, when a homeowner goes in without me, right? It's not like it's Ryan's buddy or anything. They just go in, they put in the form, and then they get a response pretty quickly, an initial. Now the conversation can take a long time. And so I've seen turnarounds where like within a month, a very good outcome happens. For example, there's a relatively, it's not common knowledge, but you can build 2 ADUs and a JADU on a single family property using the state rules, as long as you fit certain requirements. And so people are going into the city saying, hey, I want to do 2 ADUs. And the city's like, whoa. You get to do 1 ADU and a JADU. You can't do 2. And they're saying no. And so that goes to HCD. HCD comes back, explains that's not actually how the rules work. And then the cities have come back sometimes within a month and said, okay, we understand. You're allowed. And that's amazing. Other times, for things that are very explicit, like fire sprinklers in multifamily additions, you would think, it says it right there in the law, that fire sprinklers can't be required and that there's no group R occupancy changes from adding ADUs, which could require fire sprinklers. Says it right there. That one's taken forever. And like, it's a big conversation that, I've told that homeowner, like, if you could make a deal with the city, you don't mind installing fire sprinklers. You just don't want to do this really expensive version that the city's requiring. So like, make sure they know that, because you just want this project to move on. You want to start construction, start collecting rent in that individual's case. So it just depends.
Now, do you mind so that's new to me, the 2 ADUs and a junior ADU. I know that you said that it's very specific things.
Yeah.
Do you mind kind of sharing what maybe some of the specific items are?
Yeah. So the way to think about it is there's basically a subdivision in the ADU code that allows for a statewide exemption ADU. And there's a bunch of different types of ADUs. There's 4 categories. And those categories, I think there's the word or again, where it said you could do this or this or this or this. And the state's like, it means both. It means you could do multiple of those. And so the 2 that matter the most are, you can convert an existing space into an ADU, and you can build a new construction ADU under 800 square feet with a 4-foot side rear yard setback under the specific height limit. If you're doing one of each of those are both statewide exemption ADUs according to the HCD, and the HCD would say you are allowed to do both. That is a surprise to a lot of cities that have interpreted it to be like you can do one or the other. Now, not everybody has a lot where they can convert a structure and has the open space to build a new ADU. So it's not going to be everybody. But if you have if you're thinking about doing a conversion or a detached, you could do both in a lot of cases.
I love it. So, what do you see for the future of ADUs? I know that you're in contact with a lot of state legislators. You're in contact with a lot of attorneys. You're in contact with different cities. Where do you see the future of ADUs?
Well, it's been a great first few years with statewide momentum. The people who've been working on this longer than me, who are amazing, have been working on ADU reform since like the late 80s. And there's so much momentum in the past several years. And that tends to mean more momentum. Winners win, right? And so you had to dip our toe in the water at first, make sure the sky didn't fall on us. And now that you're seeing ADUs integrated in neighborhoods, now that they constitute up to 20% of new permits in a lot of big jurisdictions, you're seeing people say, okay, should we do even more of this? On the other hand, you've got some people who say, well, okay, parking is an issue. How do we fix parking when we add this much density to a neighborhood? And so you've got some reform on both sides. What I expect is for more and more progressive rules around ADUs because they're great, and we're seeing them exist in the real world. They get built much faster than multifamily projects in California. And so we'll see more adoption. At the same time, I expect people to want to figure out other forms of reform. So like I brought up parking because it comes up a lot. And honestly, I don't think the best way to regulate parking is to regulate housing. I think it's to regulate parking. And we should start passing those kinds of laws too that say, hey, if a neighborhood is approaching a certain density, do we create state funding to build parking structures or improve mass transit in that neighborhood? Or do we encourage cities to have permit parking on street? And things, reform like that regulates parking. But in any case, I expect some reform to happen there too, where people start making demands, be like, hey, if you increase the density of my neighborhood a lot, I don't know if the sewer can handle it. Like our local infrastructure needs to put more funding and time into utilities, parking, and other public goods. So lots of changes on the horizon. But overall, I expect more and more of this stuff. It's an incredible boon to California housing. And then my hope, which is less of a sure thing than those other two, is that we find ways to make it more affordable. Right now, because you're building, you're a developer, it's expensive, and there's already a labor shortage, especially in NorCal, and that's going to get more and more short as we build more, and that cost is going to keep going up. And what we need is the other direction. We need costs to come in line. So there's a lot of different ways to get there, but we need a skilled workforce that's ready to help us build a lot of housing. And that's hopefully we find ways to do that and to make housing more affordable at the same time. It's going to be complicated.
I love it. Any final words or anything else that you'd like to add?
I always sign off with I'm not a lawyer. No. I think this is a complicated topic. And by the time people watch this video, literally laws will have changed because the governor will have signed some of the things we talked about and will have not signed some things maybe. And like in January, things are changing again because the cities will decide to adopt separate conveyance of ADUs or not. So the way to get involved in this is to start on your scale to go, what do I want to accomplish with an ADU? What would change my life? And then start surrounding yourself with professionals and people at the city who can help you baby step your way to that goal. And be like water, change, go with the flow. It's a marathon. It takes a long time to plan and build these. But the goal changes your life because you'll have a unit where your kids can move back into so they don't leave the state, or a unit where your parent retires so that you're not spending several $1,000s a month on their care, or you'll have a rental unit and that provides housing security that covers a big chunk of your mortgage. Whatever the case is, that's life-changing. So, set the goal, put that on your fridge, and then work toward it really slowly.
I love it. And then for our viewers, maybe if they wanted to get in touch with you, is your YouTube channel, your Instagram, your TikTok, what's the best way for them to connect with you and stay up to date on the latest ADU laws?
Yeah. Selfishly, I'll say the YouTube channel, if it's big news, it goes there. The shorts and TikTok and Reels, that's also great for the little updates where I can't make a whole video about it. And then if you are actively involved in building an ADU, you're like, I'm not waiting around. I'm doing it. Then I do have a private subscription community. It's a couple $100 a month, so I don't say you have to do that at the very early stages. But like once you're in it and you really want to start achieving stuff, we have like accountability groups and people help each other in that community. It's a great way to get moving forward. But hopefully you don't need it. Hopefully you just go into the planning department and they're like, yeah, it's an ADU. Green stamp. If that doesn't happen, come find me. Come find the community. It's at howtoadu.com, and if it's okay, I'll put a link in the description below. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, are the plans set to expire soon? Like I know that I had heard originally it was like a 10-year plan. Is that gonna still happen or no?
Which kind of plans?
So the owner occupied ADU plans, not the investor one, but I know that one is going to potentially be extended.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
is
yeah.
the loss expected to end at any point, or is it just for right now indefinitely?
We're good. We're good. All of these reforms, there's a bunch of different ways that you get laws passed, and this is like not official, but this is how I look at it. When something's a big debate and you just need a few more votes, right? It's Sacramento. You go, how about this? We'll put a sunset clause in. And if we don't want to renew it, if we do nothing, after 5 years, it expires. But if it's working over the first 5 years, we'll extend that. And that's what happened with the owner occupancy ban. We just banned it for 5 years, and now it's like extended, hopefully. And pretty much all of the ADU regulations that we've talked about are indefinite, but it's law, and so law can change every year. People can come back and rewrite law. Courts can come back and interpret things differently. So, like a key example is HOAs. Right now, an HOA can't necessarily, state rules say an HOA can't prohibit the construction of an ADU, except for very rare circumstances. But there's a legal ground for somebody in an HOA to say, well, you signed a covenant when you bought the house, and what prevails in this specific situation, the covenant you signed or the
Or
state
the
rule, and that hasn't been litigated yet. And so I'm always kind of telling people like, seize the day. These projects, if they pencil today, then like don't wait till 6 years from now. Or people say, oh, should I wait for the grant? Should I wait for this incentive? Should I wait for rates to come down? Should I wait for lumber prices to go down? Man, I've heard every excuse to wait.
get
Nothing
it done.
beats a finished unit because it's your rent or it's somebody else's rent, and you're just making money every month once you got that unit done. Not financial advice, but
I love it. I love it. So, Ryan, I want to say thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate you obviously sharing everything you can. I want to encourage our viewers to go out and visit your YouTube channel and visit your Instagram, your TikTok, because I think that you provide great content. For our viewers out there, thank you as well too. Today we had Ryan O'Connell. We talked about the new ADU laws in California, 2023, 2024. We talked about AB 1033, 976, 1332, and 434. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you feel that this episode will be helpful to somebody, make sure to hit that share button. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you to our guest. And until next time.